Welcome, and thanks everyone for joining today's virtual event on Brandformance. My name is Do Lee, and I lead the integrated media strategy and planning team in the Americas for DEPT. I'll be your host for today. So we know this is a topic that we know is top of mind for many of you, whether it be because you're simply wanting to hear more about what brands are going through today as far as Brandformance goes, or you're needing to think about securing budget for your next fiscal with your leadership team, or because you haven't had any mind space to even think about which initial steps you can take to start talking about brand and performance together in the same sentence. So whatever your reason may be, our purpose for today is to really shed light on real life challenges and questions that brands and clients are coming to us with every day, and what approach and solutions they are leaning into to drive sustained growth beyond the short term, and start becoming more comfortable with Brandformance. And also importantly, we believe because there's no one size fits all solution and each brand is unique, we really hope that you walk away from today's event and the content serves as a fodder for future dialogue with your own stakeholders or with any of us at DEPT and Google who are here to listen first and foremost. So with that, I'd like to introduce our speakers for today. So you'll be hearing from Aprajita Jain, the Chief Brand and Creative Marketing Evangelist at Google, who is no stranger to speaking to brand and business leaders globally about really navigating the complexity of marketing and helping them overcome their challenges. And also joining me is my colleague from Netherlands, Nellika, who serves as a media director at DEPT in EMEA. So today's content will consist of three parts. First, we'll provide glimpses into what clients and brands that we work with and talk to have been sharing with us as far as challenges and they're facing and the questions that are really top of mind for marketers today. Second, we'll get a unique vantage point through what Google and Aprajita is really seeing and hearing from clients at a macro level. And lastly, we'll showcase a series of interconnected solutions for growth and recent brand examples that speak to some of the elements that we'll talk about earlier in the presentation. First, while there are unique challenges and questions that are specific to every brand, we distill them into key three themes that are most common and representative of the pool. To summarize those three key themes, first, brands that we really talked to today are really seeing decline at the end of the journey and seeing their ability to capture demand really dwindle. And continuing to pour more into the same performance bucket isn't necessarily generating net new demand and any growth. And that's really been a challenge that we're seeing a lot. Second, brands are really having to do more with less. And the process of justifying investment with their leadership, with their teams, has gotten more complex and harder. Third, brands are really struggling to keep up with impactfully reaching and engaging their key audiences throughout the purchase journey. So we'll talk a little bit about what brands are doing about that and what challenges are really impacting their decisions every day. So around the first theme of performance alone not being enough, here's some ways that brands have been challenging us. A US-based consumer brand with both e-commerce and big box retail presence, they've been asking us how we can work together to protect their brand against competitors and set themselves up for success and capture new customers down the funnel. So this is really around generating net new demand with brand activity, where they were seeing declines and they're plateauing in terms of growth at the bottom of the funnel. So they've been coming to us with that challenge. Another client in the financial space with both B2B and B2C focus, they were actually really struggling to generate new leads, and also they just went through a rebrand. So they were really trying to think of how can we, achieve both launching a new brand and getting their new brand identity out there, while building a business as usual structure that, again, continues to really work as an engine to generate leads and conversions. Another really quote here, this is from a software brand in the crypto space who's really looking to make their brand more recognizable and memorable as crypto adoption grows. There's a lot of volatility in the crypto space, as you know. So they were really trying to get their name out there and become synonymous with the category and really distance themselves even more from the competing brands. So, again, really unique challenges for each of the brands and in different categories. But really, there was a really big theme around how can we leverage brand marketing to grow their business in the long run. So from a planning and budget setting perspective and justifying investment, the second theme, again, really there's a lot of commonality in terms of the questions and challenges that brands are coming to us with. The first one here is a quote from a mid-sized brand looking to scale their business, but they didn't really have more budget than what they had last year. So, and this is something that we run into all the time with different clients. We still want to find additional opportunities to unlock volume and increase revenue while maintaining efficient return on ad spend. So this, obviously required us to really start thinking about testing and reallocating funds into new tactics to find pockets of growth. And this specific case, actually, we really actually experimented within Google Ads, where we're comparing and optimizing between Smart Shopping and Performance Max. And so this question is something that we get a lot from clients. The second one here is from a client that provides AI-powered content editing. And they were really looking to understand, does brand search drive incremental subscription over and above what organic search and other media channels are compensating for? So, it's really about understanding, do we spend more behind paid, or is there something that we should be doing more from an organic perspective, and what's the relationship there? And the last quote here, is around, right, really understanding that marketers today have to think about, justifying and rationalizing their spend with their CFO or their CEO, their leadership team. And so, they were really, battling with the idea of launching a big brand campaign, but really, thinking through how do we talk about this? How do we justify it with the CFO and what we're getting out of the campaign? So again, something that I think would be familiar to many of you today. The last, topic here, the theme around, brands really struggling to reach their audience in an impactful way and really being able to break through clutter. A North American-based tourism client that we work with, they're really asking us to think about, hey, how can we deliver integrated, innovative, and inspiring branding and creative media all together to make our brand sexier than ever before? So, I think this really goes into not just media, but into creative messaging, branding, website, overall brand experience. So that's something that we are hearing a lot from clients on. How do we connect those dots so that from a consumer perspective, all of it is coming through with the red thread? And then the last quote here on this slide is from a multinational computer hardware and software company. And this was really around, consumer experience, and the brand really wanted to engage the audience more than beyond just an ad, but to really let the consumers know, even through marketing and advertising, that the brand is here to help solve their issues and their needs. So I think this one was really unique in the sense that they're asking us to think beyond just paid media, even though that was our primary remit, to think about overall consumer experience. So that really pushed us to think outside into SEO, into content, into conversion optimization. So we know that this is something that really helping us to also think and work with other teams within the network. So with that, I hope that some of the things you heard from brands that we work with are resonating with you. And with these themes around Brandformance top of mind, I would like to hand over the mic to Prajita from Google to shed light on what she is seeing at a macro level. Prajita?
Thank you, Du. This was definitely resonating with me with every step of the way as you were sharing what your clients have shared with you, because I have very, very similar conversations with the CMOs and CFOs of the companies that I work with. So 100% aligned with what the current maladies of marketing are. And I'm happy to provide just my perspective on, what are some of the things that I've noticed. What are some of the solutions or approaches that we can take to overcome these challenges? So to number one, branding and performance, how do we marry the two together? In fact, in my 20-year career at Google, I spent the first 11 years just focusing on performance marketing because that was the only solution we had back then. And then eventually, once we built our business on display advertising, video advertising through YouTube, I got more and more curious. And I said, I want to understand the other side of the house, right? What do you do once you tap out your growth with just performance marketing? Because only so many people that know about you will search for you. So you have to look beyond that to generate future demand. So that's when I pivoted my career 9 years ago into brand marketing. And very quickly, I started understanding that when you look at both sides together, performance and branding, we shouldn't even differentiate them so much. We should call it brandformance, which is what I always call it. The effect of them together is more than 1 + 1 = 2, right? You get cumulative effects that you wouldn't get if you were to remove one of those two disciplines. So I'm happy to share with you what happens with a little bit of this over-reliance that I'm seeing sometimes on the bottom of the funnel. And rightfully so, in the beginning, you start your business, especially when you're in the e-commerce category, very heavily relying on performance marketing. But unless you think about the mid and upper funnel very soon into that, you will face a few issues. Number one, the burden on the lower funnel just becomes way too heavy, right? The lower funnel, the performance marketing is expected to carry business performance in the complete absence of any brand demand generation that you have done for the future. And that is a heavy burden to carry. The second one, you are essentially driving up your acquisition costs over time, but you're forcing money into markets to capture this lingering return amongst a set audience that is already aware of you. So you're putting more and more pressure on that acquisition cost because you're not expanding your view of newer audiences that you could acquire at a lower cost. And the third one is there's a greater risk of lower funnel underperformance because now you're reliant on acquisition to even out that high CPC or that competitiveness that you're seeing at the bottom of the funnel. But because you never look beyond that, you feel that the performance marketing engine is just getting more and more sluggish because of all the other effects of competition, increasing CPCs, seasonalities that you're not in control of. So we don't want that over-reliance on just the bottom of the funnel in many ways, as you just saw. Now, if we go on forward, I want to share with you this concept of why does 1 + 1 become more than 2? What you see here in this graph is a research study done by Liz Binet and Peter Field. They're two very renowned marketing effectiveness researchers. And they wanted to prove out the incremental sales basically generated from different types of marketing activity. So what you see in that darker gray at the bottom is anything incremental that you generate from performance marketing. And what you see in those more round gray circles there, that is anything you would generate from brand marketing. Now, what's interesting is in the first 6 or so months, performance marketing is generating incremental sales increasingly, but then it starts plateauing out to a certain extent until you add brand marketing on top of it. That's when the incrementality starts going up by quite a bit. And you have to give it time. A lot of times I see brands will run tests for 2 months, 3 months max. And then the CFO comes down and says, well, friends, we gave you money to test a brand campaign. We're not seeing incremental results. Let's just pause this. But that's exactly the point where if you had sat past that, what I like to call patience period, you would have seen way more incrementality at the other end of it. So roughly 6 months is the mark when you start seeing that beyond performance marketing incrementality, which then also, as you can see, the spikes in the darker gray at the bottom are also increasing. That's because the demand that branding is creating at the top is now being converted at the bottom incrementally than what performance would have done by itself. So overall, when these two play together, you're growing on both fronts, performance and branding, which adds up to more than each of these individually. This is obviously the macro level view from the study that Liz Bennett and Peter Field have done. This, what you see here, data comes from our own research that we have done at Google. So we basically looked at 200 advertisers that were really well set up on performance marketing, right? They had everything optimized from targeting to keywords to their text ads, but they had never added an element of brand building to their media mix. So we thought this is a really good test and control type of situation. We added YouTube brand videos to their media mix for 2 months, just to understand what would happen at the end of this test to their performance results. Right, so we let it run for 2 months. We didn't even do major optimizations. And at the end of the 2 months, when we looked at the reports for just the performance marketing campaigns, we saw this 8% higher conversion volume, higher conversion rates, but also lower cost per acquisition overall. So that is, again, testament to the fact that by itself, now the finance team might come down to the search team and you're like, guys, you did a fantastic job. Here's more investment. Please put that towards search. But because of this experiment, we know this additional benefit came from adding the brand marketing campaigns on top of it. I'll show you an example of a company that has done this really, really well. There's a company called Quadlock. For those of you who haven't heard of them, they are basically a performance device mounting company. So if you're an avid motorcyclist and you want to attach your phone to your motorcycle for directions or recording, they have these devices that they make that are really sturdy for that situation. Their challenge was that they were, very social first, very bottom of the funnel. Everything that they did on performance marketing was very, very search-based. But they also understood that they needed to increase their brand salience in the consumer's mind because their target audience is already fairly limited. And they also were looking to grow their revenues. They understood that that was not going to be possible with just performance marketing and some of the social content that they had out there. So the approach that they took is they went to their CFO and they asked, what would it take us to prove to you that brand marketing will actually work? Very analytical person. He said, well, I need data before I trust any of this mid and upper funnel mumbo jumbo. So we set up a geo-based experiment for them to measure the campaign's incremental impact. And the way they did that is they looked at 3 test markets and 3 control markets across the US. And they made sure that these markets were matched based on the number of site visits coming from each of these markets, but also the conversion rates between these markets. They ran this campaign mid and upper funnel for 30 days. But Quadlock analyzed the results for 60 days, knowing that the branding that they're building in the first 30 days will have trailing effects even afterwards. And they wanted to understand what is this long-term impact on search based on what we did in these first 30 days. I will first show you the commercial that they used for that, the video campaign, and then share the results with you. So let's take a look at the video.
Keep your phone secure while you ride with Quadlock. Buy now from quadlockcase.net.
Right? Short, sweet, very easy to understand. Now, the results were pretty phenomenal. When you look at the 3 exposed markets versus the control markets over the 60-day period, this full funnel creative strategy delivered 34% new website visitors. So net new, never had been to their site before. Their purchases increased by almost 20%. And with that, their revenues also went up by 11%. There was one more stat which I want to share because it really highlights the relationship between branding and performance is they had an over 300% increase in branded searches for their term Quadlock. And we all know how valuable those type of searches can be in terms of conversions. What you see up here is another metric that we often don't pay attention to until our CFO asks us about it, But I always ask myself, if I'm sitting in a room with a CFO, what is the one metric they probably care most about if they're really thinking holistically about the business and not just all these media metrics that we often tend to focus on? And the answer is always they care about shareholder value, right? If it's a publicly traded company, shareholder value, otherwise revenues and profits internally. So I said, there must be some correlation between building a strong brand equity and seeing impact on that one metric. And fortunately, there's this incredible study done by Kantar. It's called the Brand Z Portfolio Study. They looked at what happens to the stock price or the stock indices of different types of companies based on the strength of their brand equity. So you see these 4 different graphs here, right, in 4 colors. The very top, the darker blue, is the top 10 brand portfolio in terms of brand equity. So top 10 global brands with the highest brand equity. The lighter blue includes the next 90, so that's the top 100 brands. The magenta is the S&P 500, which most of you might be familiar with. And then the purple is the MSCI World Index, which includes about 1,600 global brands. Now, if you look at the timeline, in the last big recession, 2009, 8, 9, 10, obviously every brand suffered. They delivered a negative return on investment, negative shareholder value. But the problem isn't that, right? Every brand will suffer. What you will notice if you look more up close is the ones in the blue, with the ones with a higher brand equity, suffered a little bit less during that period. And more importantly, as we came out of the recession, so 2011-ish onwards, you see that the brands with the highest brand equity grew up to 9 times faster than the average brand because they had invested in building brand equity. And that's, again, the power of branding that we often overlook because we are always so caught up in our media metrics that we forget the big business metrics. That brings me to a great second point. And I think, Doe, you mentioned this earlier, that you always get the question, well, what if my CFO asks me to show the results? But first of all, when CEOs or CFOs and CMOs aren't focused on the same metrics, they aren't running the same finish line, right? That's the sentiment that I often get in these conversations I have on a daily basis, is that they're slightly talking 2 different things. So my goal in many of these meetings is to just come to some basic agreements between the finance team and the marketing team. And I'll share each one of these with you. So the first one I always say is create a joint dashboard between the 2 teams, right? Something as basic as a very high-level dashboard. And keep in mind, it doesn't, rather it shouldn't include 50 different metrics. We are often prone to, oh, I can track this, so I should track this, and I should include this. That's a little bit of a problem of having too much data. And believe me, we at Google are a victim of that too. But over time, we have refined it so that when our CFO and CMO meet, literally the only 2 things they care about discussing is the profitability generated from paid advertising across the board and the forecasted lifetime value of our customers and the new ones that we are acquiring. But if you can move these 2 metrics through your paid advertising activities, you have done your business a really good one. Nothing else should matter if profitability and lifetime value of your customers can be optimized. So that's what the dashboard should look like. Number 2, your testing and measurement strategy needs to be discussed together, because otherwise the marketing team will propose a test, they'll come up with all the parameters, they'll run it, and then, as I said, 2 months down the line, the finance team will say, oops, we're not seeing incrementality, let's stop this. Now, you won't get it perfect right the first time, but every time you set up a test and you follow certain best practices, you will learn something new that will make you better over time when you do the test over and over again, maybe 3, 4 times, but also it will set you up for success against your competition, because not a lot of companies have that mentality of, okay, let us move the needle incrementally by testing and measuring, even if we don't know what the results are going to be just yet. And lastly, improve your budgeting process along with the finance team. The majority of CMOs tell me, well, we look at our media mix models, we look at which channels performed well, and then we add some incremental dollars to the ones that did well, we remove some dollars from the ones that didn't do well, and then we take that proposal to our finance team. Believe me, 95% of the conversations I've had have some version of this going on. I always say, why are we relying on past years' data to make future decisions for our media, for our consumer behaviors? Everything has changed so fast in the recent times that you just simply cannot rely on that past data anymore. Instead, let's create our budgets for marketing, for branding, performance, looking forward. Right? What are the goals we have for the following year when it comes to branding? Am I trying to increase awareness by 20%? Am I trying to increase consideration by 10%? Against which target market? How much will it cost me per channel to do that? What is the cost per lifted user? Really put some detailed math behind it. It won't be 100% science, but with some really good educated guesses, you can get very close to what that budget should be for next year, rather than just hoping you pick the right number from last year. And that is especially important if you're entering new markets, because you won't have that past data available in the first place. All right, now let's talk about this third piece, right? How do we meet the consumer where they are? How do we make customer experiences better? And I have to say, sometimes we're a little bit of a victim of our own success. We have all created incredible organizations. Our marketing teams have grown. We have siloed it by channels. You manage TV, you manage digital, you manage social, and maybe there's some print and audio, but it's so siloed by channel. Instead, we need to think about the consumer again, like the basics of marketing. Everything should be anchored in what our consumers want. And that also dictates a different organizational strategy. Instead of siloing by channels, how about we start structuring ourselves by, we have a team for insights generation across all our channels. We have a team for measurement across all our channels. We have a team for creative design across all of our channels, right? Because then you start breaking up your customer channel by channel, which in real life, I'm Aprajita. I'm not Aprajita who is on social and Aprajita who is on YouTube and Aprajita who is on search, right? I'm the same person across these things. So that will help us think that way. And by the way, there's also this fear in marketers. They always think, I don't know how often I can talk to my customer, what will be too annoying, what will be too much. There's this fear we might alienate them. But honestly, in all the research we have done and I've seen, it's quite the opposite. Today's consumers are saying there is no bad ad, right? I'm okay with ads, just make it a really good one. So if you look at these things here, branding doesn't ruin the story. We don't have to be hidden and have our brand logo appear at the bottom right and the end just to be looking sophisticated. They want the brand to show up. They want to know who you are and what you stand for. Second, make it really, really easy to understand, right? Use your audio cues, your video cues. Make it simple for them to know what you want. Easy language, easy text, easy voiceovers. And lastly, and more importantly, really grounded in their reality. As I said, they're not anti-advertising like maybe past generations. They just want to see something that connects to their daily lives. And I'm going to show you an example of a very unlikely brand to have done this so well. So many of you might know, love, or hate Velveeta from Kraft. It's the square packaged processed cheese that comes in that plastic foil. And I am very proud to say that Velveeta isn't a cheese brand anymore. It's actually become a lifestyle brand. They even created a platform around it that's called La Dolce Velveeta. I'll give you a little bit of a history behind this because it is actually quite interesting. So Velveeta gained popularity back in the early 1900s. And it was a Swiss cheesemaker, out of all the people that you could think of, people who make the best cheese made Velveeta. So the Swiss cheesemaker, Emil Frey, he invented this in 1918, and then Kraft acquired this brand or this product in 1927. Back in the days, in the 40s or so, Velveeta was seen as this practical and hearty product during wartime. Then in the 1950s, the brand started touting its nutrients for weight-watching mothers, interestingly enough, right? They reached their sales peak around the 1995, 1996, around that time frame. And from there, they started seeing this rapid decline in the early 2000s amid this increased awareness of health effects of processed food and this not being real food. There was a lot of just social awareness about those type of things. So when sales fell, they had a problem and they needed to reinvent themselves. In 2020, if you look at their sales numbers, their balance sheets, you'll see they had an unexpected 24% sales surge in that year and then onwards. Not surprising, right? 2020, COVID happened. Everybody was sitting at home looking for easy recipes. Velveeta helped with that. But that's when they really woke up to the idea, we need to be more than just what we actually sell, which probably everybody knows is not the healthiest product. But they started doing a lot of consumer surveys, understanding what do people use it for, what really matters to them. And their own marketing director said that we were a very dusty brand before 2020. We just had lost our magic and our mojo. We really needed to figure out how to revive that with younger consumers so we could continue growing as a business. So when they did this survey with Gen Z and millennials at the beginning of COVID, they understood that today's consumer is all about permissible indulgence, as they call it, right? It's all about the hit the spot food. And it's okay if it's not the healthiest, unless that's the only thing you're consuming. In fact, there was a very interesting quote, which I know I'm saying this here on this live stream, so please, if you have kids nearby, close their ears. The one quote that they got through the survey was, "Sex is great, but have you ever had Velveeta?" So people were clearly seeing this as a pleasure food now. So much so that one of the results that they also saw come back to the survey said, if we go to the next slide, hopefully this imagery will help. One of the quotes said, "I think of my body as an amusement park, not a temple." So they knew that Velveeta really at this point stands for this outrageous pleasure, this wingman that you have when you're going out on an adventure. They really built on that sentiment that they were picking up on through the surveys. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see they created all sorts of fun product ideas. This is the Veltini, the Velveeta Martini. It was among the many tactics for winning clout with this younger consumer. Then if you go to the next one, this is the Velveeta scented nail polish. Again, I don't know who would want to wear this crazy Velveeta yellow on their nails, but clearly it was picking up. And I'm not saying this was a new product category that they were trying to win on, but this was a marketing tactic in a 360-degree manner. They were not thinking of just performance, just branding, offline, online, social, TV. They had a holistic 360-degree strategy going with this. Now, the brand's platform name, La Dolce Velveeta, was actually inspired by a 1960s movie, La Dolce Vita, very, a cinema classic, basically. And translated from Italian, it means the sweet life. So one of the main characters in that film was, her name was Sylvia. She was this eclectic, free-spirited actress who just embraced life unapologetically, right? She had this crazy lifestyle. So they wanted to translate that into this experience. And again, they were trying to reach this younger audience. So they created a web experience, a mobile phone experience, where you could add Vel you up to your text as a booty call, basically. And the Velveeta chatbot would respond, and you could just order fries with Velveeta on it, or they partnered with other fast food retailers to include Velveeta as part of that experience. Again, niche idea, but very, very cool, and really got this brand in the minds and conversations of this younger audience. I'm going to show you two pieces that they created for YouTube, again, based on this whole platform of La Dolce Velveeta. The first one is it's called the La Dolce Velveeta crowd. Basically, a woman standing there and giving everyone something to stare at, very bold, unapologetic. So let's play the first video.
I saw a distant land, and it called to me.
right? Pretty fun. It's a slightly longer video. It's not a 6 second, and yet you're engaged. You want to watch. It just draws you in. They did a series of that. They had about 6 or 7 different ones. I'm just going to show you one more on that same video. This is called the La Dolce Vita Pre. Almost meditative, that whole experience, right? And how wonderful was this? And if you think about it, the underlying product is what it is. They didn't end there. Again, as I mentioned earlier, it was a 360-degree execution. So they went a step further and took this into the offline world by working with actress Julia Fox. They debuted her Velveeta-colored hair at an NCAA game. They basically created a hair dye that Fox wore, which was custom made to match the Velveeta specific yellow shade. And then she was carrying a packet of Velveeta in her transparent clutch. That became quite the showstopper. They were tracking the earned media impressions based on that. And believe it or not, in the first week, they had 1 billion earned media impressions from just that stunt that they pulled off with Julia Fox at that game. So they also even, like, if you go to the next slide, they actually, because it was such a media buzz, they actually ended up creating a product that you could buy. In fact, you can go to Amazon today, search for it. I think it's $7.99 if I'm not mistaken. But if you want to have that type of yellow hair, you can. The entire idea for me to show you this long example is, if any CFO throughout this process had come and said, we're not funding this because we don't know if this will perform or not, we don't see the impact on performance right away, this would have never worked. In fact, nobody would have even worked on this. So you need to build trust that a full funnel, 360-degree campaign, which includes offline, online, paid channels, earned channels, owned channels. In this case, they even went as far as creating these new products, which obviously not everybody has to do that, but this is just how far they went to prove that all of this combined will drive better results than if you look at these individual pieces by themselves. So having that faith sometimes is just as important as focusing on optimizing every single cent out of a performance campaigns, because at the end it will pay off, which in their case it did, 24% increase in sales and growing. Right, and with that, back to you, Devu.
Thanks so much, Prajita. Really, really great stuff. Thank you for sharing. So with that, we'd love to pick your brain and ask you a few questions. I feel like there's a lot in here that we could talk about, but one thing that stuck out to me was kind of the need for time and being able to actually wait until you see the impacts of your brand marketing and your media. Would you say that for again, a lot of, let's say, brands with limited budget and maybe a sales cycle that could be maybe longer than others, or just depending on kind of different business models and different consumer buying cycle, how would you advise on brands that always feel like, we don't have all the time to wait and see what's happening? Are there things that they could adhere to, or best practices that they could rely on, as they really make that case internally on the need to really kind of letting the time and the budget and impact take place?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a question I also often get, like, how do we even do it the first time, right? If you've done the test 2-3 times, you've seen good results, then I have enough data points to take to my finance team and say, give me another 6 months and I'll do it again with a different campaign. But what if you've never done it before? So 2 things here. One, if the problem is budget, you don't have to do a nationwide test or something as big as what Velveeta did here. Pick a small region, right? Geotests can be designed as small as you want, keeping in mind you want at least a minimum level of penetration. If you go in with $100, obviously you're setting yourself up for failure. But for that market, what is the maximum penetration you can generate with the budget you have? And then you shrink or grow that market accordingly. The second, if the issue is time and not necessarily money, then just look at different KPIs. They will not be your final KPI, which for most companies is sales and revenue. But you can have proxy KPIs that will give you a really good indication whether your test is going well or not. Things like cost per lifted user. Am I doing surveys that are increasing the sentiment about my brand? Am I seeing indications of increasing market share? So from another piece of research, we know market share reacts to share of impressions with a roughly 6 to 8 week lag. So it's much shorter that you will see your market share change based on how you're influencing your impression share. And that is, again, you don't have to wait 6 months for that. It's a much shorter period of time. So just look at some proxy metrics that would make sense for your company, that are trackable, but that somebody would also believe in within the company.
Awesome. And one last question for you. With some of these campaigns, I know you mentioned, right, whether it's a YouTube, adding YouTube to the mix, and for brands that maybe haven't run YouTube before, or even with the different tactics, how would you say the ability to really start to understand metrics like brand lift or awareness consideration? Would you say that ability for Google and different buying platforms within Google are able to measure those things? Like, how would you say that has evolved or changed over time? So I remember, doing, YouTube testing, the different two-cell tests and brand lift measurement. But we'd love to understand kind of how, you're seeing some of that change or evolve over time.
I mean, I don't think we have lived in a better time when it comes to online video measurement. You can track down pretty much anything you want, from not just overall your video strategy, but one specific campaign, one specific creative within that campaign. So it's that granular. And yet, interestingly enough, I get all these CMOs that come and say, well, I love doing TV because the CPMs are low and it's just working for us. And then when we get into a conversation about YouTube, the conversation becomes, oh, but wait, how do we know which 3 seconds of this ad performed the best, and how much sale did this 3-second video drive, or what can we edit to increase the sale from 12% to 18%? I'm like, wait a minute, like, let me understand, how are you so confident that TV is increasing your sales without having any measurements around this? And you're looking at online video, and not just YouTube. I'm sure that's the same with our other partners too, like Meta, Instagram, TikTok. The need to prove out the value of those channels to the most granular little decimal point is a little surprising to me. Despite that, I feel there are so many ways you can track how many more people are searching for you. What is the volume increase of people that are now considering you? What is the purchase intent? If you have stores, if you're a retailer and have physical and digital presence, how many people were influenced by that specific piece of creative that then walked into your store, right? These types of measurements, I'm amazed. In my 20 years, I would have never thought earlier on that this would be possible one day.
Awesome. Awesome. I think that it wraps up our section here. Thanks again for sharing your insights and examples. Great. So with that, we will use the remainder time here to kind of walk you through and showcasing some of the ways in which myself, Anelika, and our teams are bringing solutions and recommendations to our clients today, and also be able to share some real brand case studies that we're really excited about sharing. Having heard from Aprajra around some of the great examples that the power of brand really translating into performance and ultimately driving growth for these brands, we'll use the remainder of our time really showcasing some of the work, the tangible ways, some of the systems of thinking that our teams, Nelika speaking from EMEA side and me from stateside, that we bring to the clients on a daily basis. We'll include some of the real life case study as well that are really near and dear to both me and Nelika that really demonstrate some of the solutions and showcases our recommendations for clients today. Earlier, we covered 3 key themes around common challenges that brands are grappling with today. Seeing declines at the bottom of the funnel, and performance really stagnating, clients having to prove out every dollar and being pushed to generate more outcomes with less resources, and struggling to create impact with audiences in fragmented media landscape. So as a response to those challenges, we will speak to number 1, a Brandformance approach, essentially answering how a brand should plan and activate both brand and performance marketing to maximize desired outcomes. Number 2, we'll touch on some of the ways that brands can invest purposefully and make better data-driven decisions where investment can really help drive results in the next part of the funnel. And lastly, we'll highlight best practices around creating seamless brand experiences through other marketing levers such as creative, content, customer experience that are inevitably tied to media effectiveness.
Great. Thanks, Dawu. So we'll kick it off with Brandformance approach. Because whether it's through brands or performance campaigns, in the end, our clients are mainly looking for making an impact on their business. And whether they're growth strategies, there are quite some different approaches. You can either look at growing your market share, stealing it from competitors, growing the category itself, or also entering a new market with a new brand or maybe with a new product. These different strategies are all very reliant on a really solid full funnel approach. And we have a couple of solutions on how we work on creating that full funnel approach. We know that to create sustainable business growth, brand and performance campaigns go hand in hand for short-term and long-term impact. But to really understand the impact of every activity that we do, we have different measurement methodologies that we can use for this. We have multiple attribution solutions ranging from media mix modeling to incrementality tests to really understand the contribution of each channel or activity. And to use that for the forecast, making sure it's aligned with these findings and also the objectives of the campaign, we use bidirectional media planning, looking at the media investment bottom up as well as top down, making sure we're doing the right thing for performance as well as for brands.
To illustrate what Nelika just talked about, and this is one of my favorite and most recent case studies that is really hot off the press. So for those of you in the Bay Area, I'm hoping you've heard of your newest sports team in your vicinity, the Golden State Victories. So earlier this year, we worked with the Golden State Warrior organization to launch a Brandformance media campaign that would achieve 2 main objectives: to drive awareness of their newest professional women's basketball team coming to the WNBA in 2025, while acquiring season ticket deposits through their marketing channels. We know this is really important for them to really drum up their fan base and to really drive just the profitability as they launch a new team. So in response, DEPT developed a full funnel media plan that leveraged a variety of channels and campaign types. On social, we leaned into broad targeting within the Bay Area, allowing Meta and TikTok algorithms to maximize reach in the local community. We also leveraged a variety of creative formats, delivering ads across advertising plus, advanced plus placements from 15-second to 60-second storytelling videos. We also use a lot of different display and social ad units to really help drive education about their identity, the brand identity, brand logo, and colors as well. On search, we targeted a mixture of keywords from generic to brand tokens to league-specific terms and high-intent ticket keywords in order to drive website traffic and season ticket deposits. Lastly, we also had connected TV placements really being shown during live WNBA streams to really capture fans who are already tuned into the WNBA league and franchise. The results were really positive here, and we are still really excited to see the continued growth of the season ticket deposits and new site visitors to the website. They actually became the first team in women's sports history to surpass 18,000 season ticket deposits, which is a big achievement. And from a paid media campaign perspective, specifically, our campaigns were able to really drive 2,200 deposits, really contributing to the overall success. So really super stoked about this case study. The next theme here is really around investing purposefully. So we understand that a lot of the challenges and concerns that clients have today in a hyper-fragmented media planning and buying space, it's really daunting to figure out how much to invest, where, when, amongst whom, and how often to invest. I know we also know that there are a ton of different buying platforms that you could access the same inventory. So there's almost too much a choice out there for marketers to choose from. So we know that these questions really keep a lot of our clients and also our teams really up at night, and we can fully empathize with marketers having to explain and justify every dollar that they have to invest to their senior leadership. So this really is all about intentionally planning and testing your media efforts that really garner actionable insights and learnings while maintaining as low risk as possible. And what we really propose to clients to help them invest in a performance accountable manner and do so purposefully and responsibly is a blend of exercises that, when done together and acted on together, it really provides high value and actionable insights. For the question of, am I investing enough or too much, in fact, in any given channel or channel mix? For that, we really work on identifying marginal return on spend for a given media channel or a mix or tactic by modeling the relationship between spend and conversions. So that's something that really helps brands think about budget setting and whether they have enough budget to achieve their objectives. For the question of really, do I have the right mix of channels that's yielding the most efficient return on investment? Incrementality test, really paired with forecasting, really helps us to think about what is the right level of budget in a specific mix of channels when you're employing more than one, right? So this is, after having done marginality and understanding incrementality of each channel, then that's where we are able to better forecast what budget level is appropriate to drive certain outcomes or goal that you have in mind. Additionally, from a media planning perspective, prior to actually activating the campaign, we also factor in category-specific seasonality and regional considerations when it comes to sales propensity. And that really helps us to set optimal budgets in the right pockets so that your investment has a better chance of driving growth than just doing a uniform blanketed approach. Another real life example here, really that incorporates some of the elements that we just covered, is from Blue Apron. So we worked with the data science analytics and our programmatic team and the Blue Apron team to conduct a match market testing. And we actually ran the programmatic channels through Google's DV360 to understand whether display, online video, and other video channels, which were actually newer to the brand, were in fact driving incremental conversions over and above contribution of touch points like search, social, as well as organic channels. Through the March market testing, Blue Apron was able to corroborate that programmatic media continuously provided significant value to brands' bottom line, and also it increased brand search demand as well. And also from a business outcome perspective, we saw registration and sessions go up in the control markets. What we saw in the test markets where programmatic media was withheld, there was a noticeable downward trend. In other words, opportunity for conversion was missed by not having programmatic ads turned on in those markets. So this really helped us to prove the value of upper funnel media and adding new channels to the mix.
Cool. Then we're up to the third one, which is the seamless brand experience. which we will really also want to focus on the role of having strong creatives. We know brand and performance campaigns both heavily rely on having strong creatives, which accelerate the results. And having strong creatives usually depends on distinctiveness and consistency, because those factors really make sure that we can increase attention and stickiness for our target audience, which means better ad recall, which means a better impact of your campaign and your touch point. And we really want to make sure that our target audiences experience the brands the same across the different platforms and touch points, while also personalizing their experience where we can. That sounds like creating a lot of assets, but we know that there's also quite often a limited budget. And we use our content machine in order to build a huge variety of assets without using a lot of manual work. So make sure by using templates that are coherent with the brand guidelines that we can scale up and produce a lot of assets by the push of a button. And that's then applied to all the channels that we deem important, using the mapping of the customer journey of our audiences, making sure we cover all crucial touch points and build a consistent story across the fragmented landscape that Will also already mentioned. That means we look at own channels as well as paid channels, and also at earned media activity that we do. We also look at SEO and content optimization, making sure that we use the brand strengths and USPs in order to further leverage that unique position and also pull in the right audiences through owned and contextual platforms, for instance. And to illustrate this, one of my favorite cases, which is the Smart case, which is one of our biggest clients in EMEA. Smart was planning to schedule a very large international campaign across the full funnel, multiple cars, multiple messaging, a lot of USPs they wanted to highlight. And by using our content machine, we created close to 10,000 assets for 13 markets within a year, using for large campaigns for social, video, and display, as well as for email and for websites. And by using that machine, we were able to reduce costs compared to manual work with about 75%. And the impact that we saw was much higher than our benchmark, which is 3 times higher than the industry benchmark that we looked at. So it was also showing that not only was more efficient, but it also showed a big impact on the results.
Awesome. Well, that really covers that section around us really showcasing tangible solutions and best practices when it comes to tackling Brandformance. We want to just go over a few questions just that we hear a lot from clients, and ones that I know people in the room really ask oftentimes. So Nalika, since I know you just talked about the Smart case study, I would love to really ask a little bit around. We know that Smart was trying to launch marketing campaigns across different regions and countries and markets. So I would love to know, how did you account for planning across the different markets, given that Smart as a brand likely had different levels of brand awareness and consideration levels?
Yes, definitely. Good point. Because I think we started with that impact on short-term versus long-term sales activations versus brand activation. So there were markets where we could rely on the brand awareness way more. So our performance went way more smoother than in some of the other markets. So that meant for the other markets, we still had to really build that brand consideration, which of course meant a different planning strategy, looking at the audiences, looking at competitors, but also how can we leverage then the unique USPs of the brand per market. So it was quite a dynamic exercise to map out USPs and audiences and brand awareness levels per markets. And we used to cluster them as well to make sure that we are not too far away from a centralized approach.
Awesome. And I think we have more time, so I'll ask one more question for you. I know there's been a lot of discussion around building, future fit strategy for marketing in a world where cookie deprecation finally sets in for good, and identities become less deterministic. What are some of the ways clients are adapting to this, this reality, and how would you advise marketers who are considered data deprived, and they really need to help expand their data footprint?
Yeah, definitely. So there are definitely multiple ways to kind of cope with that situation. I think the most common strategy is also to build your own first-party database way more solidly than maybe it was in the past, because you have to rely on your own data a little bit more. Another option could be that you look at, for instance, marketplaces, audiences, and those kind of databases where you can tap into existing databases without losing track too much of their performance. And another one, which is a bit more about the tactical approach, is that we also focus on contextual approach, right? So we don't look at just audience targeting, but also in which context do you want to be visible. So it's a bit of a shift of a mindset there as well. But thanks, Tabu. If that helps about your part, I was wondering, like, what are some ways in which you've seen media planning and activation evolve over time? And that has like changed the way you advise brands on fundamental media choices like budget allocation, KPIs, and also measurement.
Yeah, I think there were earlier years, for me personally as a media planner, when everything was looked at in terms of, GRPs and cost per reach and reach curves. And I think I've also gone to the other end of the spectrum where last click driven CPA and incremental ROAS, were like the primary metrics. And I think they're both valid. But I think after having kind of full circle now, I feel like now we're at a point where, those metrics are not mutually exclusive, and but they can be actually optimized and bidded upon at the same time in an additive way. So I think with the algorithms and machine learning, really making bidding choices, for a lot of our campaigns, and you can start to do that across multiple KPIs and multiple variables today. And so I kind of look at it as almost a ranked choice optimization, where you can have a primary KPI and secondary KPI, and you can let the machine really optimize towards both. And so it's less wasteful in the way the dollars are spent and invested. And also, it factors in both sets of KPIs where you can drive more eyeballs, but also while not sacrificing conversions and lower funnel metrics. So, I think it has evolved a lot to a point where it requires a lot more rigor and collaboration from planners and activation hands-on keyboard teams today. So I think that a lot has changed for sure.
Yeah, cool. And I think like you mentioned, like the machine. Another machine I'd like to ask you about is more like AI and creative. Like there's quite a healthy skepticism around like how good AI and automation really are when it comes to producing creative assets and content. Are there any examples you've seen personally where like leveraging either worked out really well, or maybe some where they didn't work well?
Yeah, I think where AI and the tools are today in terms of capability, I think the notion of kind of trash in, trash out is still true. In that you really need to have the right brand identity and guidelines and foundational assets. That includes how you talk about your brand, what the copy should be for the different ad formats and different environments, from static to animated to video, and even colors and imagery and lifestyle image. Those are all basis of creating good assets, and automation and AI can help once you have those foundational assets in place. So I've seen cases where brands really didn't have any of those things in place, and they really needed to spend more time really laying the right groundwork for building the right creative assets. And once they did have those in place, our tools were able to create hundreds and thousands of different versions and in different shapes and dimensions that really worked really well in different channels. So I think it's really about balancing, how you convey yourself as a brand and having some of the foundational things in place before you plug that into the machines. So
great, thanks, Dabu.
I think we'll wrap up the Q&A here, just to wrap up and close here. And so, I really want to thank everyone for joining today's virtual event and sticking around with us to the end here, and hearing from both Google and our team. And really, we want this to be something that help fosters conversation and dialogue, whether it's with your own internal stakeholders, with your partners, but also, we're here to chat with you, with our Google counterpart, with our experts at DEPT across EMEA and Americas. So yeah, we'd love to get in touch and speak with you if you have any questions, if you have any topics for discussion coming out of this event. So thank you again. Have a good one, and cheers.